set out and head for pastures new. Life tastes richer when you've rode worn feet. No water that stagnates is fit to drink, for only that which flows is truly sweet.
This is the story of one of the greatest journeys of all time. In 1325, shortly after the end of the Crusades, a young Moroccan Muslim called Ibn Battuta set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca. It was to become an odyssey from one end of the known world to the other. In all, he travelled 75,000 miles, more than 3 times the distance Marco Polo covered. Along the way, he was to meet magicians, dervishes, holy men, fire eaters, and other travellers from across 3 continents. He was by turns scholar, businessman, mystic, warrior. He was imprisoned by mad sultans, was married 10 times, and had countless concubines. And when he got home, after 29 years on the road, he wrote it all down. Nearly 700 years later, I discovered his travelogue and was blown away by it. Here was a description of a kaleidoscopic Muslim world that I could still see around me, but one that for most non-Muslims was hidden behind a veil of misunderstanding, ignorance, and even fear. From that moment, I was determined to take to the road, to follow in Ibn Battuta's footsteps and discover if the exotic and welcoming Muslim world he described remains to this day. Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. You might know this country as the realm of the Queen of Sheba. You might even know it as the ancestral land of the Bin Laden family. For me, it's home. I came here to study Arabic 25 years ago and never left. Now I'm more than half a Yemeni myself. Part of me misses good English ale, hard to get in a Muslim country. But my Yemeni side makes up for it. Like almost all the men here, I indulge in a drug, perfectly legal by the way, called gat. Meet my dealer, Sabri. What I do when I buy it, I tend not to buy it by the look of it. I sort of go, I'm a sort of nose, you know, like a wine nose, because I open it up a bit like that, and I stick my nose in it, and I take a deep breath. And everyone's, you know, foreign visitors who come, they always say, how can you chew that stuff that looks like a privet hedge? It's a bit like when you first drink it, it doesn't actually taste intrinsically very nice, but you soon get really into it, and then it's even more like, if you like. كم عندي لك؟ You see, it's when he looks at me like that I can't refuse him. All this may seem a long way from my very English roots as an Oxford classicist, conductor of the college choir, and captain of croquet. But so what? I like it here. Where else can you live in an architectural masterpiece next to a donkey market, have scrambled brains for breakfast, and while away your evenings with virtuoso lutanists? I'd be perfectly happy to do nothing but sit in my house chewing gat, writing and reading. But there's something that's given me itchy feet. It's a book, The Travels of Ibn Battuta. He was an Arab traveller who made one of the great journeys of exploration and opened the world for generations to come. But you've probably never heard of him because the world he explored was the Islamic world. I've devoted years of my life to writing about him and researching his epic journey, and he deserves to be known as history's greatest traveller. Ibn Battuta's journey took him crisscrossing 75,000 miles across the globe. His route appears random and wildly eccentric. When he was travelling, Christendom was still dragging itself out of the Dark Ages and towards the Renaissance. But Islam was at its glittering height. About half the known world was under Islamic rule, and the trade routes lay wide open. This was a golden age of Islamic travel, and Ibn Battuta seized the unique opportunity to see the world. For a Westerner today, retracing his route remains a journey into the unknown. On this first stretch, I'll tread the ancient pilgrim roads and explore that central tenet of Islam, travel in pursuit of knowledge. Then, on the road all the way from Turkey to India, I'll encounter a world where the clear lines between the great religions have blurred into mysticism. And on the last leg of the Odyssey, I'll meet the living relics of a glorious but forgotten age of Islamic trade along the maritime Silk Route to China. The story begins 3,000 miles from my adopted homeland, on the far edge of Africa.
The memory of my homeland, Morocco, moved me, together with affection for my people and friends, and love for my country, which for me is better than all others. A land where charms were hung upon me, whose earth my skin first touched.
We've just crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, arriving here in Tangier, Ibn Battuta's birthplace. This is the end of Africa. It's the end of the Mediterranean world, and in Ibn Battuta's time, it was the end of the known world. In the 14th century, Tangier was a frontier city, perched on the border between continents and civilizations. I'd always thought of it in its 20th century incarnation as a hotbed of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, a hangout for William Burroughs and the Rolling Stones. But nowadays, the Tangerines, the people of Tangier, seem almost genteel. Fashions come and go, but one name remains in vogue. Ibn Battuta is the ultimate local boy made good. I've come here because I can imagine it's just the sort of place where Ibn Battuta would have come and sat as a small boy, looking across the Straits of Gibraltar and looking at Spain, thinking about far travel and distant lands. He visited something like over 40 countries on the modern map. But the important thing with Ibn Battuta is that he came home and he wrote it all down. You read about him getting the runs, getting ripped off by guides. He's very much a ladies' man. He gets married 10 times. He talks about all his concubines that he had on top of his wives. And you can feel this character jumping off the page. But very little is known of the early life of the city's favourite son. And looking for clues in modern Tangier was not going to be straightforward. Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Welcome.
You speak English.
Thank you. Not enough. That's late. Welcome. You need any help?
Yeah, I'd like a room, please. But I want a really nice room. If you've got any relics of Ibn Battuta, you know.
Yeah. We have the best one room, a suite, family room.
A family suite.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you just tell me who's this?
This is the picture of Ibn Battuta.
Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always wondered what he looked like, and I never thought that he would look like that.
I don't think it's real, but it's just imitate the picture.
And there was more. This is Ibn Battuta.
True, yeah.
But it's a photograph.
Photograph, yeah. No painting, but a photograph.
But, and he's smoking a water pipe, a shisha. Yeah.
Shisha.
I thought Ibn Battuta lived before tobacco came from America.
Sure, yes. Before they come from America.
So do you think it really is Ibn Battuta?
Really.
Really?
Really. I don't know, I'm not sure.
search for Ibn Battuta begins in the Kasbah, the oldest part of Tangier, where the traveller lived as a small boy. Even then it was a restless place to grow up, a meeting place of cultural currents from around the world. Several of these currents cross in Gnawa music, a mystical blend of Islamic religious songs and African and Berber rhythms, which dates back over half a millennium. I wanted to know if the travel bug had infected all Tangerines across the centuries.
Tangier people, they like to travel, to live. The real Tangerine is multicultural.
You must have heard of Ibn Battuta.
Sure, yeah, this is very famous, yeah. That was behind me is the door where he used to live, the Battuta. And he started traveling from...
What, he lived here?
He lived here.
Seriously?
Yeah. Seriously, I'm talking seriously. You didn't know this?
No, I really didn't.
Just behind me, if you look, there is a small door here.
You're really serious? You're not kidding?
It was here, yeah. He started his trip.
Yeah.
He was prepared his horse and his animal donkey here with his father.
Well, Abdul Majid has just told me that we're actually sitting right next to Ibn Battuta's house.
Sure, this one.
And I'm absolutely... I mean, you could knock me down with a feather, as they say. We know Ibn Battuta lived in the Kasbah, but did he live in this very square? There's not a wisp of evidence for or against. All these imponderables were making me hungry for facts and for a solid 14th century lunch. Any lentil munchers and chicken nugget nibblers might care to avert their gaze. We've got some sheep's heads, they're looking quite perky, freshly killed, and so artistically arranged. And we've got some little sheep's brains, delicious ones, I'm sure. Some hearts. Sin al-Halib. He's just showing me the milk teeth to prove that the lambs are quite young. Very Ibn Battuta thing to eat, I'm sure. The Quran says that you should eat from all the good things that God has given you. And so it's regarded as a sort of a bit off to refuse these blessings in whatever form they come. Excellent. This is absolutely magnificent. We've each got a head here, a sheep's head, and they're cut Damien Hirst style, beautifully served on a lettuce leaf. Tongue. It's hot. It's very hot. But it's hot when you get into the middle.
Very tasty indeed.
I was joined for lunch by my guide, Saeed, a modern Tangerine who sounded as if he'd learned his English in Brooklyn.
Tourists who see this thing being sold outside in the open and they go...
He told me that the Islamic tradition of slaughtering a sheep once a year reaches back across millennia, all the way to Abraham.
We learned from our fathers and forefathers how to kill a sheep. Killing a sheep is not a problem. Anybody can kill a sheep. You have to kill it properly. Then you have to skin it. I hired a person who would skin the sheep for me, but I'll kill it in front of my kids. So they learn. Since it has been descended from Abraham to kill a sheep, Ibn Battuta must have done it that way.
So we've just in fact had something that Ibn Battuta might himself have eaten.
And other generation long before him.
In the story of his adventures, Ibn Battuta tells us nothing of his early life and next to nothing of his life once he'd finished his 30 years of travelling. We know that he was born in 1304 and that he was educated in Islamic law. We know that he had a beard and that he was from a respectable family, but that's about it. I needed to search for his spirit, for his reincarnation, for glimpses of his face among the crowds of today's Tangerines. But where to start? At the beginning, of course, with those first lessons on the Quran, the book that guides all Muslims through life. As a young boy in the 14th century, Ibn Battuta would have been taught in just the same way as these children, learning to recite the Quran by heart. Madrasas like this one are often seen in the West as breeding grounds for future Islamic extremists. But holy war was not on the curriculum here. Today's lesson was about how travel is an integral part of Islam.
قواعد الإسلام شحال هما؟
خمسة.
قواعد الإسلام شحال هما؟
قواعد الإسلام 5.
أيوة.
الشهادتان.
إيه
الصلاة.
والصلاة.
والزكاة والصيام. والحج على من استطاع.
حسن جدا.
The teacher has just asked them about the 5 pillars of Islam. And the last of these pillars is pilgrimage. Pilgrimage, of course, was the reason that Ibn Battuta left Tangier to go to Mecca. For these children, as for Ibn Battuta, the Hajj pilgrimage will be more than just a trip to Mecca. It's an opportunity to see the world. In Ibn Battuta's case, it was a gap year that would turn into 3 decades of travel. قال ابن بطوطة كان خروجي من طنجة مسقط رأسي في يوم الخميس الثاني من شهر الله رجب الفرد عام 25 و700 معتمدا حج بيت الحرام. ايوه لما تكون كبير ان شاء الله تروح الى مكة. ايوه
كل مسلم كيتمنى يوصل لديك المقام وهو بيت الله الحرام.
تمام. ومن يتمنى منكم يزور بيت الله الحرام؟ وأنت بسم الله؟
نعم.
ما اسمك؟ أيوة صح.
كلنا.
ما شاء الله عليك. إن شاء الله تزوروا مكة. إن شاء الله تحجوا مثل ابن بطوطة.
Saying of the Prophet, seek knowledge even if the journey takes you all the way to China.
Islam itself began with a journey. Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina marks the year 0 in the Islamic calendar. Travel is in the very fabric of Islam. And although the physical relics of Ibn Battuta had proved elusive in Tangier, his wanderlust remains as strong as ever. It was now time for me to move on, chasing the traveller's shadow across North Africa.
I set out alone, having neither fellow traveller in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor caravan whose party I might join, but swayed by an overmastering impulse within me and a desire long cherished in my bosom to visit these illustrious sanctuaries. So I braced my resolution to quit all my dear ones, female and male, and forsook my home as birds forsake their nests. My age at that time was 22 lunar years.
Ibn Battuta left Tangier for Mecca in 1325 and headed east through modern Algeria, Tunisia and Libya. His account of the journey is sparse until he arrives in the city he calls a unique pearl, Alexandria. Exactly 680 years, 2 months and 28 days ago, Ibn Battuta came into Alexandria along this very same street. In those days, it would have been remarkably similar to what it's like now, a sort of a busy market street full of clothes, kind of deconstructed Marks and Spencers.
السلام عليكم.
هلو
البريزة ايه؟
باريزة
البريزة ايه؟
$2
$2.
2
لا لا لا
نو
لا لا 20 جنيه. الكلام
شكلك هتغيبني.
انا اسمعك من اخر
هتغيبني.
انا اسمعك من طرف الشارع وين بتقول 10 جنيه. تفضل
اوكي
تفضل يا راجل تفضل.
دولارات
ب5 جنيه ب5 جنيه.
الرجال يا مدام ببريزة.
In the 14th century, Alexandria was buzzing with the trade of all the Mediterranean. For Ibn Battuta, a young man from the western fringe of the Muslim world, it must have made Tangier look provincial.
May God protect Alexandria. She's a well-guarded frontier citadel and a friendly and hospitable region, remarkable in appearance and solid in her structure. Glorious in her surpassing beauty, uniting in herself the excellences that are shared by other cities through her mediating situation between the East and the West. Every fresh marvel has there its unveiling. Every novelty finds its way thither.
Ibn Battuta absolutely raved about Alexandria in some of his most high-flown prose. He said Alexandria has all you could wish for in the way of embellishment and embattlement. He compared it to a secluded maiden arrayed in her bridal finery. And he said Alexandria is like a pearl glowing in opalescence. Of course, the city has changed a bit since 1326. If Alexandria in the 14th century was a secluded maiden, I'm not sure what you'd call her today. Perhaps a woman of a certain age. Ibn Battuta had a way with the ladies. He'd already picked up his first wife on the road to Alexandria, divorced her after an argument with his father-in-law, and then married another woman. But I had no one to keep me company, and Alexandria is a rather sad place to be alone in. There's a certain mix of the surreal and the melancholy. Wonderful key change in that last one. Ibn Battuta didn't rest for long. He soon took to the road again and headed for an obscure village in the Nile Delta, 30 miles from Alexandria, where he was to have an experience that would change his life forever. He wanted to meet Egypt's greatest living holy man. I headed off to the countryside to see if any memories of the sage had survived.
تعرف منية بني مرشد؟
أنا أعرفها جنبنا.
نعم.
قرية جنبنا.
أيوه قرية. نزور المرشدي.
نزور جامع المرشدي.
الله سامع عن الولي. تعرف إيه عنه؟
كان راجل صالح معروف. صح. عارف بالله.
ما يستحملش. He seems worried about his delicate tuk-tuk, about taking it over the bumpy road, so I think I'll have to walk the rest of the way. Assalamu alaikum.
I was rescued by a man with a donkey.
Ibn Battuta came here to Muniat Beni Murshid to see al-Murshidi, greatest living saint in Egypt. Hey, slow up a bit. Slow up a bit. greatest living saint in Egypt of the time. And he was supposed to have powers of being able to foretell the future given him by God. We're just about to collide with a gaggle of geese here. Assalamu alaikum. Azayyakum. Thank you. It's a wonderful Louis Farouk sofa here, sitting by the canal.
The retreat of this holy man, whom I had come to visit, lies close by a town and separated from it by a canal. I arrived before the hour of the afternoon prayer.
There it is, afternoon prayer being called.
I'm not sure Munyat Beni Murshid had seen many foreigners since the 14th century.
Actually, I can imagine very much this is how Ibn Battuta arrived in this village. I mean, he would have had similar transport. He was a foreigner, you know, this weird Moroccan from the other end of North Africa. I imagine that he too was surrounded by a crowd of children like this, all saying, "Oh, look at the funny foreigner on the horse." In fact, I mean, he was probably surrounded by a crowd of their great whatever grandfathers.
Our cameraman kept the children entertained while I tried to track down the imam of the mosque. When I found him, he didn't seem very pleased with the manner of our arrival. Still, he took me under his wing and told me that the mystical saint had a tomb which was attached to his mosque. When Ibn Battuta met the man buried here, he had one of the strangest experiences of all his travels. As the children closed in on us again, the imam commandeered my copy of Ibn Battuta's book and soldiered on with the story.
ونزل هذا الأمير بمعسكره خارج الزاوية ولما دخلت على الشيخ رحمه الله قام لي وعانقني وأحضر طعاما فوكلني وكانت عليه جبة صوف خضراء وعمامة صوف سوداء النوم قال لي اصعد.
When I wanted to sleep, he said, "Go to the roof and sleep there," for this was during the summer heat. That night, as I was sleeping on the roof of the cell, I dreamt that I was on the wing of a huge bird, which flew me in the direction of Mecca, then made towards Yemen, and finally made the long flight towards the east, alighted at some dark and greenish country, and left me there. I was astonished at my dream, and said to myself, if the holy man shows me that he knows of my dream, he's all that they say he is.
Next day he gets up and the saint interprets the dream and says it means he will go on the pilgrimage, he'll go to Yemen, he'll go to Iraq, to the land of the Turks, to Central Asia, and he'll end up in India, where he'll fall into a great danger. But don't worry, because a brother, a spiritual brother of the saint from here, will save Ibn Battuta from it.
And so it came to pass. The prophecy reads like a contents page to Ibn Battuta's travels. 15 years later, he was even to have the foreseen near-death experience in India.
I was amazed at his prediction. Now the idea of going to these countries had been cast into my mind. My wanderings never ceased until I visited them.
Standing on the very roof where Ibn Battuta had his prophetic dream, I too felt time and space slipping away.
I bade him farewell and departed. Never since leaving him have I met on my journeys aught but good fortune, and his blessed powers have stood me in good stead. I traveled next through the Delta.
Ibn Battuta seemed to be in no hurry to get to Mecca. The backpacker in him was beginning to enjoy getting sidetracked. Instead of taking the most direct pilgrim route through the Sinai Desert, he turned south. He was heading up the Nile to the most populous city in the Muslim world and the center of Islamic civilization and culture, to Cairo.
I arrived at length in the city of Cairo, mother of cities and seat of Pharaoh the tyrant, mistress of broad provinces and fruitful lands, boundless in multitude of buildings, peerless in beauty and splendor, the meeting place of comer and goer, the stopping place of feeble and strong. Therein is what you will of learned and simple, grave and gay, prudent and foolish, base and noble, of high estate and low estate, unknown and famous. She surges as the waves of the sea with her throngs of folk and can scarce contain them for all the capacity of her situation and sustaining power.
The population of Cairo in the first half of the 14th century was around 500,000, 15 times larger than that of London at the same period. If Alexandria had seen metropolitan, Cairo was megalopolitan. It was the seat of Arab arts, letters and sciences, and even had an eye hospital which offered cataract operations. Al-Azhar claims to be the oldest functioning university in the world. It was founded some 3 centuries before the first Oxford College. In the 14th century, it was home to the greatest concentration of scholars and jurists in the Arabic-speaking world. Ibn Battuta took every opportunity to study at the feet of eminent Islamic professors, brushing up his Quranic recitation.
قال يا آدم أنبئهم بأسمائهم.
الإخفاء احنا عاوزين بين الميم والباء انفراج بين الشفتين حتى يخرج الهواء.
وآمنوا بما أنزلت مصدقا لما معكم ولا تكونوا أول كافر به ولا تلبسوا الحق بالباطل.
The university retains its magnetic preeminence to this day. Students come from all over the world to study here, not least from Tangier, Ibn Battuta's birthplace.
طبعا في تعليم اسلامي في المغرب. فليش فضلتم السفر الى الخارج؟
فوائد السفر تفيدك المعامله مع الاشخاص، تتعرف على اعراف وتقاليد الامم الاخرى. تعامل انا مثلا هنا في مصر لكن اعامل المصري واعامل البنغلاديشي واعامل الصيني واعامل التركي وغيره، لا اعامل المغربي فقط ولا المصري. اما اذا بقي في البلاد هناك مشاغل تشغله عن العلم
ايوه.
اما اذا سافر، السفر يعني يسبب في الفراغ للعلم والطلب.
اذا من اسباب السفر ان الواحد يصل الى فهم الخالق بمشاهده المخلوق او الخلق.
مخلوقات، حتى المخلوقات لا نستطيع نحصرها معرفتها، فصير حتى نعرف اسرار الكون.
ايوه.
من الخالق لن نصل له مهما بلغنا من العلم.
This is what I love about travel, the incongruous encounters you have along the way. Here I was, a travel writer and a Christian, talking theology with a group of Muslim students in what's effectively the Vatican of Islam. I may have been an outsider, but I felt completely at home.
أنتم مشتاقون أو مش حساسين بال؟
أكيد اشتياقنا كثير، بس يعني رسالتنا علم. نعم. يعني نصبر حتى نصل إلى مبتغانا. من خلال كل هذا يعني لأجل هدف نصبر.
نعم. بس بعض الأحيان في
الليل. لكن مسافر يعني في الصيف مسافر.
يعني ما فيش ولا واحد مثل ابن بطوطة الذي قضى 29 سنة مسافرا.
ابن بطوطة كان ليس عنده وسائل السفر، لو كان عنده طيارة كان يرجع كل مرة إلى المغرب.
The Egypt Ibn Battuta travelled through had a unique and strange political system. Young Turkish slaves were bought wholesale from the Central Asian steppe and taken to Egypt. They were converted to Islam, taught the arts of warfare, and finally freed from their bondage. the top government commanders and the Sultan himself were then chosen from among their ranks. This warrior caste were known as the Mamluks, which means slaves, and they ruled with an iron fist. When Ibn Battuta stayed in Cairo, the Mamluk Sultan was Muhammad al-Nasir ibn Khalawun.
There's this rather nice story, well actually it's quite a nasty story that tells you exactly what Muhammad al-Nasir, the Sultan, was like. And it's that he was born with his fists sort of clenched like that, and when they opened them up, blood poured out. And the midwife said, he's going to be a bad one, he's going to have a bloody reign. And she was right. One of the things that he did, actually right here at Bab Zuwayla, there was some convicted criminal, I forget what he'd stolen, and he had the guy crucified on this gate in drag.
Although, as far as I know, the current Egyptian president doesn't string people up in skirts, he still runs a tight ship. Democracy is theoretically encouraged, but in practice, all political opposition is stifled. The week I arrived in Cairo, the long-running conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians had exploded again. The Egyptian security services feared demonstrations after Friday prayers, and they were taking no chances.
I think there are probably as many policemen as worshippers here, and there's something rather medieval about their appearance with their carbon fibre, Kevlar, whatever they are, shields and their helmets with their visors. And up here too, we're sharing our little eyrie with some secret policemen who are partly looking down at the worshippers and partly keeping an eye on us to make sure that we don't film in the wrong direction. It all sort of reminds me of Mamluk rule. We're talking about two lots of oligarchies relying on military force, relying on pressure. It's rather faceless, rather battleship grey, monumental, oppressive. 670 years ago, and now we can make quite a strong parallel. Plus ça change.
As long as you didn't fall foul of the Mamluk despots, 14th century Cairo was brimming with raucous and bawdy entertainments. The souks were packed with street storytellers, shadow plays, dancing camels, and even professional performing farters. For Ibn Battuta, Egypt was one of the culinary high points of his travels.
In this city, there are to be had various preparations of buffalo milk cheese, which are unequaled for sweetness and delicious taste.
I needed a good food guide to the city. Habiba is an old friend of mine and a talented cook. She took me off to the market to introduce me to the tastes Ibn Battuta enjoyed when he was here.
Would you like some old cheese?
Old cheese?
Yes.
I don't know if I like the sound of it.
نص كيلو يا ست.
It smells piquant, I think is the word. It's got something sort of restorative in it. It's kind of got a... Do you know, when I was at school, we had these changing rooms that had... they always smelled of socks. Beckham بياكل منه. بياكل منه. Rooney بياكل منه. Rooney? This gentleman is saying that Beckham and Rooney eat old cheese.
Seafowl are sold in this city in large quantities and are exceedingly fat. And the fish called alburi, grey mullet.
This is an old Egyptian delicacy called fasikh. Essentially, it's raw, rotten fish.
OK, can I have a feel? Oh, God, it stays in.
Each year, around a dozen people die of fasikh poisoning. Being a gambling man, I was up for this culinary Russian roulette.
Oh, God, oh, the smell. You know when you drive past a roadkill?
This must be better.
You say it's better? Do you know, I could be converted to that.
At Old Cairo, too, is the cemetery called Al-Karafa, a place of vast repute for blessed power, for it is part of the Mount of Al-Muqattam, of which God has promised that it shall be one of the gardens of paradise.
The so-called City of the Dead is supposed to be off limits to foreigners. This was once simply a cemetery, but over the years the urban poor have moved into the tombs. The government now regards it as an embarrassment. Habiba was born here and managed to sneak us in.
This is what Ibn Battuta wrote about this very place, the place that you're from. These people build in the Karafa beautiful domed chapels and surround them by walls, and they construct chambers in them and hire the services of Quran readers who recite night and day in the most beautiful voices. They go out every Thursday evening to spend the night there with their children and their women folk, and they make a circuit of the famous sanctuaries.
Actually, we used to do that until very recently, but people stopped, actually. We used to go, in the feast or in any religious occasion, we'll go to the cemetery and spend the night there and take the food and all this sort of stuff.
Habiba's mother had died recently. She told me that although the traditions Ibn Battuta described are disappearing, Egyptians still have a special relationship with their dead.
I never found anywhere in the world how we look after the dead more than the live people. Yeah, it's an important part of our life, the dead and the cemetery and stuff. It's very, very important. Everybody wants to be sure he has his tomb, like the pharaoh, you know, and it's where it is and should be closer to his family. And we mourn for a long time, and you never stop. You never stop. For me, if I pass here, anytime I say a prayer for the dead. But from
أنتم السابقون.
وَنَحْنُ اللاحقون.
You are the ones who go before us,
yes,
and we are the ones who come after you.
Hospitality to travellers is a religious duty in Islam. Ibn Battuta was a past master at taking advantage of the kindness of strangers. Knowing I'm a fair trencherman myself, Habiba rounded off my culinary adventures in Cairo with one of her signature dishes.
This is a surprise for Tim. I'm cooking him a testicle. It's a lamb testicle. I'm going to marinate in onion and black pepper and salt, and then I'll do it in the... It's very painful, actually, to cut it. I don't know. It hurts. Yeah. Maybe I should use better knife than this. But anyway, this is going to be delicious, okay? Anyway, this will be like that. Okay, this is the thing.
There's some testicles you prepared earlier.
Yes, yes. And then it will be even more painful. Yeah. We'll do it outside. Then everybody can enjoy. Huh? Okay, that's enough. Also, we are going to cook this delicious stew with okra. It's called bamiyan Arabic. And prepare some meat and tomato sauce and garlic and cook it in it. This is the whole idea of this meal is something people eat forever.
Do you think Ibn Battuta might have eaten some of these?
I'm sure. And I'm sure he ate some testicles too. This is my surprise for you tonight. Some barbecued
Testicles.
Enjoy.
Oh, they're beautiful. And they're even in pairs. Habiba, look, it looks as though you've emasculated 5, what are they, rams? Just for my delectation.
Ibn Battuta was fascinated by aphrodisiacs, and in Egypt, testicles are generally held to ginger up your sex life.
Neil, you'll go for some bollocks, won't you?
Next came my journey from Cairo by the route of Upper Egypt, with the object of crossing to the noble city of Mecca.
From Cairo, Ibn Battuta headed south. Rather than wait for the season of the Hajj pilgrim caravan, he wanted to explore the towns and villages along the Nile. Once again, his wanderlust had got the better of him. He planned eventually to get to the Red Sea and sail to Arabia. The Egyptian authorities had forbidden us from filming in Middle Egypt because of security concerns. So I made straight for the city of Luxor and picked up the trail there. In Ibn Battuta's time, the word tourism meant spiritual, transcendental travel. But for the millions of visitors who come here each year, it's something a bit more down to earth.
The wife wanted to come to Egypt. We were supposed to bring her last year, but we couldn't, so we came this year, and this is his first trip abroad.
Great.
An American friend of ours, her husband's Egyptian, and he said that we needed to go to Luxor first. He said that all the artifacts are here, so we flew into Luxor, and we've been going to the Luxor Temple, the Karnak, Valley of the Kings, and tomorrow we have the hot balloon ride.
Hot balloon ride?
Yes.
Wow.
Pyramids, sphinxes and mummies barely get a mention in Ibn Battuta's travels. He showed a remarkable lack of interest in what's now the staple Egyptian tourist fare. But perched on top of one of the pharaonic temples in Luxor, all but ignored by the tour groups below, is a tomb hunter's treasure. This is the resting place of a Muslim saint praised by Ibn Battuta for his piety and famed for never letting a year go by without performing the Hajj. Even today, devotees travel thousands of miles to pay their respects. One of the pilgrims assumed I was a Muslim and invited me into the mosque.
What's your nationality?
I'm British.
England.
Yes.
Are you Muslim?
Muslim. No, actually, I'm a Christian. I shouldn't. Yes, I shouldn't. But I'm always being mistaken for a Muslim. It comes from speaking Arabic. But the Imam and the pilgrim didn't want to convert me on the spot. Instead, they gave me a history of the site, which for them was an illustration of Islam's superiority.
ترابي مردوم تراب يجي كده السلم يجي كده على الترابي كان يخش المصلين تخش من هذا المكان.
So this was actually
under these chairs.
Chairs?
Yeah, under معبد يهود. Under temple of Pharaoh. Tell you that the last Islam.
I think I understood what he was saying.
The gentleman says that this is a lovely metaphor for the way that religions have followed one another, and the last one and the seal of the religions is Islam.
For many Muslims, tomb visiting is something to be done regularly, like changing the oil in a car. It ensures the smooth running of history. This old pilgrim was a veteran traveller and collector of Muslim saints.
القرآن فسيحوا في الأرض هذا order from God. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اطلبوا العلم ولو من الصين. هذا دليل على ايه؟ على ان لازم تخرج لا تتقوقع في مكان واحد.
صح. I have an idea that perhaps because God is impossible to understand, and we can only begin to understand him by traveling.
Yeah. مخلوقاته دليله. السادة قالوا ايه؟ كون في روث بهايم او الغنم الفيسز بتاع الغنم.
نعم.
دليل على ان في غنم.
صح. That's a beautiful analogy.
I had found my transcendental tourist. It was time to get moving again. From Luxor, Ibn Battuta continued south up the Nile. The Egyptian authorities judged this area to be safe for foreigners, so I hired a boat and set off in his wake.
The Nile is one of the 5 great rivers of the world. There is no other river on earth that people call a sea.
وحتى أبد وين ما شئت يا يما وين
It is related in an unimpeachable tradition of the Prophet of God, peace be upon him, that the Nile, the Euphrates, the Sahan and Jahan are each rivers of paradise.
والنيل مصر يفضل أنهار الأرض عذوبة مذاق واتساع قطر وعظم منفعة.
Our boat hand, Mustafa, had lived on the Nile all his life.
ليس في المعمور مثلها ولا يعلم نهر يزدرع عليه ما يزدرع على النيل. صحيح الكلام هذا؟ يعني أنت كنت سمعت عن أي نهر ثاني؟
لا ما سمعتش غير عن نهر النيل. نهر عظيم يعني واكتشاف بنفسك للزرع يعني والأرض يعني كتير. والخير الحمد لله كتير يعني.
الحمد لله. طبعا يعني كان يكتب هذا قبل 670 سنة. فيعني تشوف الأمور تغيرت أو
الأمور دلوقتي تغيرت. دلوقتي في مثلا بيوت يعني زمان ما كانش يعني دلوقتي زمان كان البيوت كان من طين.
صح.
ولكن دلوقتي حاجة اخترعوا فيها الأسمنت الصبة.
ايوه الاسمنت والصبه هذا شيء
حديد مسلح.
بس لا زال على ما وصفه قال والمدن والقرى بضفتيه منتظمه. يعني لا زال الوضع.
While Ibn Battuta was traveling up the Nile, he met another holy man blessed with the power of prophecy.
When he asked me what I proposed to do, I told him that I intended to make the pilgrimage to Mecca by way of Jeddah. He replied, "You will not succeed in doing that on this occasion. Go back, for you will make your first pilgrimage by the Syrian road and no other."
I wanted a prophecy of my own from Mustafa. Would I succeed in following Ibn Battuta all the way across the world to China?
شيء ممكن. أنا أشوفك متفائل.
ما أصل سهل أصلا. أنت لو ليك غية عن اللي أنت عايز تروحه هتروحه يعني. لو في نفسك اللي أنت عاوز تعمل زي ابن بطوطة يعني هتعملها.
إذا كان في نفسي.
إذا كان في نفسك لو عايز تعملها هتعملها.
يعني شيء متعلق بالنية. بالنية.
It's been said that you can never step in the same river twice. But I felt that Ibn Battuta's Nile and mine were one and the same. That we were born by the same current, propelled by the same wind, and that he was only a swish of a robe ahead of me. But how would I get to his next destination, an insalubrious port on the Red Sea called Aydab?
صباح الخير. تعرفوا عيذاب؟
نعرف حلايب.
كم المسافة؟
حلايب.
أيوه.
آخر الدنيا.
آخر الدنيا, at the end of the earth, he says. That's why I'm trying to get to the end of the earth. Actually, I am trying to get to the end of the earth in many ways.
حلايب 350 كيلو.
All right, okay. Now we're getting some facts.
مشوار أهم هاي.
وكيف الصحراء؟
الصحراء كلها رمل أصلاً شمس.
رمل.
وعارف ده. وما فيش حنفية تسقي البهايم.
And there's nothing for the Bahaim, the beasts to eat. No water. It's all sun and tiredness. Oh, صح. And the sun beats down on you until you're dizzy. Ibn Battuta did it in some comfort on camels. So perhaps we should go looking for camels.
For all the years I've lived in Arabia, I've somehow managed to avoid camels. I'd always thought of them as nasty beasts that spit, bite and kick. I wasn't looking forward to this bit of Ibn Battuta's trip at all.
When Ibn Battuta got to Edfu on the Nile, he hired some Arab camel drivers to take him across the eastern desert to the port of Aydab. Now, Aydab was a pretty funny place. If you didn't pay your taxes, you were in danger of getting strung up by your testicles. And like most places on the Red Sea, it was bloody hot. السلام عليكم. كيف حالك؟ أنت اسمك نميري؟ نميري. أنا اسمي تيم. يمكن توصلني إلى الحلايب بالجمال؟
إن شاء الله. أنا ممكن أعمله.
أنت عامل التصاريح؟ وما فيش أي مشكلة؟
ما فيش أي مشكلة إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. This is looking good. وخلال الفترة هذه ما طلعت فوق جمل أبداً. اركب فوق جمل.
أنا هكون معاك وأنت بتركب.
تمام. بسم الله.
In Ibn Battuta's day, camel trains could be the height of luxury travel.
I think he went across the desert in a camel litter. So I'm going to be rather more adventurous. You know, he went in a litter, sort of reading books and playing chess or something with his mate, who was sitting on the other side. It's actually quite comfortable so far. Yeah. Yeah. Now that's better. Oh, now I can cope with this. Off on the ship of the desert.
We hired camels and set out through a desert totally devoid of settlements. This desert is luminous and radiant. There is no road, no track, only sand blown about by the wind. You see mountains of sand in one place, then you see they have moved to another.
I've spent so much of my time hunting for Ibn Battuta that I sometimes don't notice when he creeps up on me. As we rode east towards Mecca, the 670 years between us seemed to fall away. Ibn Battuta was not destined to get to Arabia this way. Just as the holy man on the Nile predicted, he had to turn back at the Red Sea and eventually made the Hajj pilgrimage over land through Syria. For most pilgrims, Mecca was the end of the road. But for Ibn Battuta, his journey had only just begun. They say travel broadens the mind, but Ibn Battuta's journey wasn't just mind-broadening, it was mind-blowing. The next leg of his odyssey took him to the new frontiers of the Islamic world, the hills of Anatolia.
It's breathtaking. I can see why you like this.
The infidel cities of the Ukraine, and the empire of the mad Sultan of Delhi.
Probably the first time Ibn Battuta saw this, he was thinking, what a nutcase.
On his travels, he encountered all that was weird, wonderful, and unexpected in the Muslim world. To follow in his footsteps will show that Islam comes in 1,000 different guises. The dancing dervishes of Turkey, the mystics and madmen of India, the magicians of the Maldives, the sages and sorcerers of China. All this lies just beyond the horizon.
Tim McIntosh Smith continues the journey next Thursday at 9 here on BBC4.